Olympics, which is a conglomeration of all my Pi games in one big unit. The Pi Olympic Games is a week-long unit that I generally plan the same week as March 14th, which is Pi Day, because it's 3/14. What I do, it takes a lot of prep to get it together, but I divide the classes into teams of 5 or less. If you have more than one math teacher that wants to participate in your Pi Olympics, you can have class versus class competitions as well. Every day that I would have this unit, there would be an opening ceremony, which I'll describe to you later, a competition or two, some notes, and a little homework all about math and pi, or circumference, diameter, radius, area of the circle, all of that. Teams get points based on participation in the games, first place, second place, third place, and turning in their homework. If their homework was complete, then their team got points. I also had to make it so that teams lost points for disruptive behavior or poor sportsmanship. I did have prizes that I gave for first, second, and third place, and for the overall final week, the teams that got gold, silver, and bronze, first, second, and third, I would have prizes for. And generally it was something like oatmeal cream pies or some hall passes or some homework passes or some little trinket or a candy or a round thing. I also used, I would have these little colorful balls in a prize box, frisbees, anything that was round that I could use to celebrate circles and pi. Here's a list of some of the events that I have done during my Pi Olympic week over the years. I oftentimes will switch it out because I get bored doing the same thing year after year. So I would by no means do all of these. The History of Pi quiz was a pretty constant, and what I did is I recorded myself reading some excerpts about Archimedes and how he calculated pi, because he technically wasn't the first to discover it, but he was the first to calculate it to 2 decimal places, I believe, if I remember correct from my reading. And he was just an interesting character. Then the digits of pi was also a constant, seeing how many digits they could remember. Archimedes' obsession is drawing the perfect freehand circle with no tools allowed. Circumference and area of a circle were notes and then a worksheet, and the teams would have to complete the worksheets to get their points. I also developed a Pi art and a Pi poetry and a Pi song or music video over the years because there are some students who are very strong in art, and then they could use that art in order to participate in the games. In fact, one of my favorite art pieces is on my wall now as retired, but this was something that she created. That was her Pi art. And then Pi poetry, there's all kinds of kids that are really strong with words and with language arts, and so I incorporated that into it. And then I would have the teachers actually come in and vote on which Pi art piece they thought was the best and which Pi poem they thought was the best. Only had one Pi video ever done. It was a music video, and so therefore they got first place because they were the only ones that participated. It lends to the more effort students put into this, the more points they got. And then there was Around Town, which was a team game. Pi Nim, which is an individual game, but I would have every person on the team could participate in the game at some point. Calculating Pi, Pi Code. So one of the things that the digits of pi is used for is cryptography. They use it to create codes and send messages back and forth because that's what codes are. And what I did is I took the printed out Pi sheet that I gave them for the digits of pi, I went a few lines down and I used 3-digit groupings to create an alphabet. And then I wrote a message using that alphabet in numbers, and then I would give it to them. The first time I gave it to them, it would just be the numbers, and I would tell them that I used your pi piece as the key, and that's all I would tell them. The next day I would tell them about an alphanumeric code and what that means, and then see if they can find it from there. The next day I would give them a clue, like I used 3-digit groupings to create my alphabet. And each time I would give them a more detailed clue as to what the coded message was. If you were able to decode it with the fewer clues, it was worth more points. So on the first day, it was worth 500 points if you could decode the message without any clue other than you have the key and here's the message. Every time I gave a clue, it went down by 100 points, so that the very last, when I gave the giveaway clue, which was I would tell them where A was in the alphabet, that would knock it all the way down to 100 points. It's interesting, it's fun for kids to try and think outside the box and try to figure out a problem or solve a problem without being given the answer. Pi statistics and digit frequency, we made a graph of how many zeros are in the first page of pi, the first 1,000 digits of pi. How many zeros were there? How many ones? How many twos? How many threes? All the way up to how many nines? And there is several interesting facts you can find from that, but I'm not going to tell you what they are because I want you to do it. It's fascinating. You can also do statistics by the longest strings of the same numbers. Like there's a string of 5 nines within the first 1,000 digits of pi, and it just looks bizarre. So other things you can do with pi statistics. You'll notice I have a pie eating contest, but it is marked out. Early on, we did do a pie eating contest, and we ended up with a kid that got choked and threw up all over the place. And that was the end of the pie eating contest. I don't want to deal with someone getting choked or with any of that anymore, much less the safety of the kids, because they do go full out. So instead of having a pie eating contest, which every year the kids wanted to do, and I'd say nope, and I would tell them exactly why, but I would have pies as prizes. So you can buy, a lot of times they have these little miniature pies you can buy, or oatmeal cream pies, or fudge rounds, or anything like that that has to do with circles. Those are the things that I made as my prizes. There are so many other games and events you could add to this, and all of these I either got off of the internet or I took an idea that I found on the internet and I turned it into a game. There's all sorts of other things you could add to this and make it your own. I would set up teams the week before the contest, and I would let the students form their own groups, maximum size 5, and it actually works way better with 4. Students can work alone, but it's difficult for their team of 1 to gain as many points as a team of 4 or 5 because I gave participation points in the competition. So if a team of 4 has all 4 team members participate in a competition, then they get participation points for each person, and the team of 1 only gets 1 set of participation points. There is some benefits because a team of 1 might have a better time of focusing and studying and making sure that they get their stuff done. So there are pros and cons to each. Once the teams were formed, I would have the teams create a name based on pi or circles or circumference or Archimedes or something like that. One of the most popular one was Pirates, and then Apple Pie and other sorts of pioneers. Those sorts of things were always team names that repeated year after year. There were some that got very creative, and I always encouraged that. Then I would have the teams, once they came up with a unique team name, over my whole 7th grade, because the last several years of my teaching, I was the only 7th grade teacher, so I had all the kids. And they would, I wouldn't let a team name repeat throughout the entire day, so they had to have a unique team name. Yes, this does make it more difficult for 7th hour, but then they have to become more creative. Then I would have the teams create a team flag. So I would take a piece of printer paper and cut it into 3 strips, short strips. And I would give those to the teams. They could design and draw their own flag. It had to have their team name on it, and it had to be done by Monday morning when we started the games. And then I would take the team flags and I would put them in on a large chart in the hallway where I kept track of all of the team standings and points for our Olympics. To do this, you do need to be able to keep track of points that each team is going to make. And I discovered that using a piece of notebook paper on a clipboard was the easiest way to do this. So as students gave me their names on that Friday before we started, I wrote them on a list on the side of a notebook paper, and I put them on a clipboard, and I would draw different columns on that clipboard. I did have an example of this, but I can't find it anywhere, so I'm going to have to just kind of describe it to you. The first competition would be the first column, and I would write down how many points their team got in that competition. Most days there were multiple competitions, so each column was a single competition. At the end of the day, I would total their points and make that in the third column and just keep going like that. I have done it on Google spreadsheets, And that does work, but sometimes the internet would go down and then I couldn't access it. I also couldn't carry my computer around with me around the classroom. I did have an iPad, but the iPad, you have to tap it and then you have to tap, 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 tap. It was easier just to take a pencil and write it in. Then I would take what I translated and put it onto index cards and put those index cards next to the team name in the hallway so that the teams would know how many points they earned for that day and how they compared with other teams throughout the whole day. Because they would pretty well know the teams that are in their class, but they wouldn't know about the teams that are not in their classes. And I had classes that were designed for students who struggled, and then I also had advanced classes and in-between classes. And every year the kids would think the kids in the advanced class have an advantage. Not really if you set up your competitions correctly, because memorization is what Digits of Pi is all about. And sometimes students who are advanced are good at memorization, sometimes they're not. Most of the time when I had a student win the Digits of Pi contest, they were not in my advanced class. They were usually in my regular math classes. And sometimes in the students who struggled, you had some kids who didn't want anybody to know that didn't want anybody to think less of them, so they would work really hard and they would get a lot of points that way. When I did put it on a spreadsheet, I would create it as a shareable document on our school website so the other kids could view it. You could go in and click the link and view the team points, but they couldn't edit it or comment on it. They could only see it. This is an example of the poster that I would put in the hallway. I did have a photo of it, but I saved it to my Google Drive, and when I retired, I saved it to my personal Google Drive. And then when they deleted my account at school, it also deleted all of my stuff from school. So I thought I'd saved it properly. Apparently not. This is basically what it looked like. I had a giant title that was like the 25th Annual Pi Olympics, whichever year it was for me. And then down the left side, I would put their flags. And I would have more than enough to do more than one poster, because they would go all the way down to the floor. So I would have one poster here and then another poster here that was identical to it, so I could have all the teams displayed and wouldn't have to stand on a ladder to reach the top ones. And these are just some of the common names I had. Index cards, I would just tape them because I would use a giant piece of butcher paper for my poster. We had the giant rolls of paper in the library. I'd roll it out, draw the lines with a marker, and then I would use index cards to tape their points up. So I'd have my clipboard that I kept their points on, and I'd be like, okay, Pirates today have 251 points. I'd write that on an index card, tape it on the poster in the hallway. Seems like a lot. It actually ended up being the simplest way to do this. At the end of day one, I then would place a little paper ribbon next to the totals that had first place and second place and third place. And then I usually had 6 classes. So there were generally 20 to 25 teams, and I would mark first, second, and third. Those ribbons are movable, so I would change them. So the next day, so day 2 totals come in, I would add the points that they earned on day 2 to their day 1 totals and post their day 2, which is a conglomeration, a total. And then I would move the first place, second place, and third place ribbons to the new first place, second place, and third place teams. And the kids really enjoyed seeing it go up and down and up and down. And you notice their apple pie on the first day didn't have very many points, but on the second day they had a lot of points. So on the first day, most of the time I would do very low point competitions. The second day they could earn a lot more points. That way a team that started out like badly, like they just couldn't get it together, were able to catch up. Now if they did badly day after day after day, then no, they're not going to be able to catch up. But I also didn't draw attention to those. Sometimes kids in middle school, they're like, well, I'm just going to get 0 points and be the biggest loser. And I'm like, well, that's your choice. But then I would give them no other attention than that. Wanted attention for not doing anything, and that's not something that I value, so I didn't give them any accolades for it. And then the same would continue for your day 3 totals, your day 4 totals, and then your final totals are the totals of the entire week, all the points that they earn. And I would often get like 7,000 points, because on day 4, when they would do their competitions there, those were worth a lot of points. The digits of pi was worth 1 point per digit that they could say. So the record was 330 digits. So that team got 330 points, plus they got a 200-point bonus for first place in that, plus they got every person on their team participated, so every person said at least 100 digits, so every person got at least 100 points. But this is how I kept points in the hallway, so that everybody that walked by could see what was going on, and you really get a lot of student buy-in at that point. As I said, low point competitions I always did first. And then bonus points for if a student got, or if a team got first place, second place, and third place. And if a team had, like if it was an individual competition and somebody on one team got a first place and somebody on that same team got a second place, they did get a first place bonus and a second place bonus. And what this did is the other kids in the class would see that them putting forth effort is what got them points. And oftentimes you would see more effort put out by other people. You're always going to have those kids that are just going to be kind of a stick in the mud and don't want to participate. Most of the time when kids would see points totaling up, it would really get them to wanting to compete and play along with everybody. I did keep the points posted each day. That retained your student buy-in. The digits of pi one, they got 1 per digit. They did have to say at least 3.14 in order to qualify. If they couldn't do that, then I didn't give them any points. Pi art and pi poetry, I gave a lot of points for those. But the entry had to show that they took their time to do it. So a lot of times because I would have pi art and pi poetry due on day 4. They had to give it to me before school started on day 4 for it to be entered. So a lot of times some teams were behind. So they would throw together an artwork on a piece of notebook paper and I would give them 5 points for it because I want them to put a lot of effort into it. So the entries that got a lot of effort, like the one that I showed you, they get a lot more points. Even if they don't win first, second, or third, they get more points for participating because they put effort into it. Not last minute thought, let's just throw this together so that I can get some more points for our team. But really to plan out and make an entry that's worth a lot more. The other competitions that I have in some of the other Pi videos, you can really give points to as you see fit. I made it work for me, and honestly, year after year, I changed it because I wanted it to work differently. I get bored pretty easily. So if it was different every year, it got more exciting. So I don't have a suggestion for point valuing those. You just do what works for you. The only one that stayed the same was the digits of pi and the pi art and pi poetry stuff. Those pretty well stayed the same because you needed to have the buy-in for that. So now here we have an example of daily schedules, just so you get an idea of how this worked. My classes were 47-minute classes. Why 47 minutes? I don't know. Well, I do know. It gets really complicated. But you know how school scheduling works. So 47 minutes was all I had. So my opening ceremonies, I had taped together. There is a website that's called 100,000 Digits of Pi. I printed that out. It was 26 pages long. I taped them together and I rolled it up and I burnt the end so it looked like an ancient scroll of pi. I would stand on a chair in the front of my classroom, let the scroll go while I was holding one end, and I would read from some section in pi, making it super dramatic, like, oh, 3.1415926 And then I would say, thank you. And the kids always stood up and cheered. Because it's so goofy, it's fun. The first day I would show the video, history video for Archimedes and how he calculated pi. And the video was just of me reading some books that I had gotten in the library about Archimedes and how he discovered pi, or how he calculated pi, and a little bit about his history, because he's a really interesting guy. After the video, and I told them they could write down any notes they wanted to for the video, they just had to write them themselves, and then they could use their own handwritten notes on their own quiz. But if their buddy did handwritten notes, they couldn't pass them around their team. Yeah, you could only use your own handwritten notes. It was a 10-question quiz, and it was just the highlights, really. And then I would give them the code description. I would tell them how it worked, how alphanumeric codes worked, and then I would give them the code and tell them your key is the digits of pi, and leave it at that. Then I would give them a little bit of time to work on the code because I didn't give any hints, and they try to get them out of you. How does this work? I don't get it. This is dumb. You didn't teach us this. And I'm like, well, that's the point of a code, is to be unbreakable and to send a secret message that other people can't break. So now what you have to try to do is see if you can break my code, see if you can get past my message. And then I would just say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to say any more than I already have. And then I would tally any points from the day from their quizzes. Their points would come from their quizzes. So the first day is 1 to 10 points on their quizzes. The team that had the most quizzes correct would get first place, and then second place, and then third place. This is where being an individual team made it more difficult than being a group of 4 or 5 team. Because the groups of 4 and 5, you get to pool all of your individual points as a team. Day 2, the second day, again, I would do a reading from a different part of the Scroll of Pi. I would give them the answers to the quiz we did before and talk about it a little bit. I would give them Pi code hint number 1. And no more than that. So usually I would say, I describe first day what an alphanumeric code is. Then I would say I used the digits of pi to create an alphabet. And it's on the paper that you have. Like, I created an alphabet. And there again, I don't get it. What do you mean by that? I'm like, I will say no more than that. If you can get it for this, then you can get it 500 points. And then we do some circumference formula notes, usually about 10 minutes. I would draw a circle, we would make the parts of the circle, what the circumference is, what the radius is, what the diameter is, and then we would practice calculating circumference given diameter, circumference given radius, and then I would give them a practice page, and everybody on their team had to complete the practice page. They were not allowed to copy, and they had to have the formula written, the substitution written, and their answer given with the proper units. So each problem on that practice page was 4 points. 1 for the formula, 1 for the substitution, 1 for the correct answer, and 1 for the correct units. Every single problem on that page, 4 points each. If I noticed somebody copying off of somebody's paper, I would say, oh no, I'm so sorry. And I would take both papers and I'd say, this one gets no points for your team. I will give you credit for it, but you get no points for your team. And most of the time it was like, what? Oh, can I try again? I'm like, well, you're going to have to start all over again from blank page. So I would deal with that differently. Then we would do the rolling digits game, which, the rolling digits game is the dice game. So we would play, they could be working on their homework when it wasn't their turn, and then each team would send a member up to the table, roll the dice until we got all the digits of pi, which, like I said, it was like 20 digits long. And then I would tally the points. A lot of times I would have to tally the points at lunch or on my planning time or after school because it would go all hour. Day 3, again, reading from the Scroll of Pi, then I would give them their circumference answers to the homework and they would have to turn it in. Pi code hint number 2. Then we would do area formula notes, again, only about 10 minutes. And then I would give them an area practice page, same rules as before. They had to have the formula, the substitution, the correct answer, and the units, so each problem was 4 points each. And then we would do another game, like Pi Nim, and I would have a desk in the center of the room with the Pi Nim board on it, show them how to play, have a few boards set up around the classroom so they could practice. And then we would do a bracket tournament, sometimes on that day, depending on my class sizes. Sometimes it would go throughout other days. And again, I would tally the points and post them in the hallway. 4th day, the last day of competition usually, but sometimes there was a 5th day. Reading of the Scroll of Pi, area answers, the final Pi code hint, which gave them what A was. Like you see there on line 4, those first 3 numbers, that's A. So when you look at your Pi code, when you see that conglomeration or that combination of those numbers, that's an A. Then we would do Archimedes' obsession, which is trying to draw the perfect circle. See that in a video. Pick a backup game if we had extra time, or do more Pi Nim competitions, and tally the points and see who's ahead. The Pi art and the Pi poetry and the Pi song or Pi video or Pi sculpture were always due the end of the day on the 4th day because I had to have teachers come in after school to judge them, and I just used a sticky note. Put a sticky note on the ones that you think are the best ones, and then once the teachers were all done, the artwork or the poetry that had the most sticky notes, got first place, second got second place, so on and so forth. Fifth day, didn't always have a fifth day, so sometimes I would have to scrunch things down a little bit. Again, a reading from the Scroll of Pi. Pi code solution given. So if nobody's gotten it, then I will just tell them what it says. And it was usually something goofy like Happy Pi Day, or usually some sort of a pi pun or a pi joke was what the code said. And then I gave them a little time for practicing the digits of pi, because I always did the digits of pi competition on the last day of competition. And then I would say, all right, it's time to recite. I would stand there as I described in the video of digits of pi, and we would see who got the most, who got second, who got third in each class. And then overall, at the end of the day, I would look at who got overall the most and the second and the third. So technically there was like a 2-tier system. Within your class, you get first place, but then also within 7th grade, you get first place. So it's like a double bonus. If you get first overall, you would also get first in your class. Sometimes I would have a backup game if there was extra time. Usually it was something like Pinem or Rolling Digits. We would play that again. And then I would tally the points. The tallying for the final totals sometimes took a day or two, because I would go back and tally each day again to make sure I had tallied it correctly. And then I would make a big announcement in front of lunch, in front of the whole 7th grade, because we had all 7th grade had lunch at the same time. So that's when I would announce who the bronze medal winner was, the team with the 3rd most points, the team with the 2nd most points, and then the gold team with the most points, and they would have little prize packages that went with it, usually like little dollar store things that were round, or oatmeal cream pies and fudge rounds and those rolly ones, Swiss rolls, those sort of things were what I used as prizes. Also would do like homework passes. There would be special universal pie pass, which I would tell them, what you do is you take this up to me if you have an idea of what you want to use it for, and you run it by me, and then I will either say, yeah, we can do that, or no, we can't. I had one kid bring it up to me and he says, can I use this to drop that test score at the beginning of the semester that made my grade go down? And because all of the rest of his test scores were great, I was like, sure. Sometimes they'd be like, hey, can I use this to skip class? I'd be like, no, because you can't skip class. So, but I would let them decide what it is. And at the end of the year, if they never used it, I'd say, turn it in. I'll give you 10 bonus points on your grade. All sorts of fun things that you can do with this. So that's a basic understanding of what I did with my Pi Olympics. And honestly, every year it was different because, like I said, I get bored. I like to change it up. It had the same basic format, generally a week long, usually the week of March 14th, even if it was on a weekend. And I remember March 14th of 2015 at 9:26 a.m. I had like a moment of silence or something. We did something cool, but it just built it up all year long. And then 3rd quarter, everybody needs a break, including me. And so this gave me a break from the same old daily grind. It gave the students a break. They got to work in teams. They got to have fun and laugh with their friends during their math class. It was a great little sort of a spring break moment. I encourage you to take advantage of your little spring break moments and have fun in your math class. I'll see you in the next video.